I should have walked away when I saw the restraints were empty. My name is Marcus Verne. 23 years I spent working maintenance at Militech's Nevada Black Site, Facility Kronos. The official records say it's a missile testing range. That's horseshit. We built gods there, and I was the man who kept their cages locked. The facility stretched for 12 miles underground, carved into dead volcanic rock 100 miles from anything resembling civilization. Above ground, just a handful of prefab structures and solar arrays. Below, 17 sublevels housing what Militech officially designated as Project Ascension. The rest of the world knew nothing about it. Even most Militech executives didn't have clearance. I remember my first day down there in 2054. My supervisor, a grizzled ex-Marine named Torres, took me to sublevel 9 and made me look through the observation window. The subject was strapped to a surgical table. Skin peeled back to expose chrome vertebrae that glowed with soft blue bioluminescence. His chest was open. Not cut, just hinged like a fucking car hood. And I could see the auxiliary hearts pumping in perfect synchronization. Neural cables thick as my wrist ran from his skull into diagnostic equipment that filled half the room. That's Prototype 13, Torres said, lighting a cigarette despite the no smoking signs. He used to be PFC Kevin Martinez. Good kid from Texas. Volunteered for the program in '52. Now he can punch through 6 inches of titanium and calculate ballistic trajectories faster than our targeting computers. The thing on the table opened its eyes. They glowed the same blue as the spinal implants. Does he remember who he was? I asked. Torres took a long drag. Sometimes. That's when he screams. That was my introduction to the world of augmented warfare. Militech had been working on combat enhancement since the corporate wars of the 20s, but Project Ascension was different. Previous programs scattered their prototypes across military units, used them as force multipliers in conventional operations. Ascension consolidated everything. Every breakthrough, every innovation, every successful prototype, all of it concentrated in one facility. The logic was simple. Why distribute experimental weapons when you could refine them in a controlled environment? Why risk valuable assets in random firefights when you could create a singular, overwhelming force? By 2077, we had 47 fully operational subjects. 47 soldiers who represented the pinnacle of human augmentation. Each one was worth more than a small nation's GDP. Each one could level a city block without breaking a sweat. The restraints were biometric-locked titanium alloy, capable of withstanding 60 tons of force. The cells were Faraday cages wrapped in 3 feet of reinforced concrete. Every door required retinal scan, fingerprint, and neural authentication. The facility had its own power grid, its own water supply, its own air recycling system. We could survive down there for 20 years without outside contact. That was the theory anyway. I was running diagnostics on sub-level 12 when the first alarm triggered. Red lights strobed through the corridor as the emergency klaxon split the air. My neural implant, standard issue for all facility personnel, flooded my vision with alerts. Containment breach. Sub-level 9. Subject 17. My blood went cold. Subject 17 was Specialist Chen, a former Arasaka defector who'd volunteered for the program to escape a death warrant. The augmentation had taken better than expected. Too well. His Sandevistan reflex boosters let him move so fast he could dodge bullets after they'd been fired. His dermal armor could shrug off anti-materiel rounds. His neural implants gave him full control over any electronic system within 50 meters. The last psych evaluation had flagged him for early-stage cyberpsychosis. I ran. Not toward the breach, I wasn't stupid, but toward the emergency evacuation station. The facility had 6 of them, hardened shelters with independent life support and direct surface access. Protocol demanded all non-combat personnel retreat to designated safe zones during containment events. The corridor shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere below, metal shrieked as it was torn apart. My implant displayed the facility map, tracking my position as I sprinted through the maze of passages. I was 70 meters from evacuation station 4 when the lights died. Emergency strips ignited along the floor, casting everything in sickly green. My heart hammered against my ribs. The air tasted of ozone and something else. Something wrong, like copper and burned circuits. Then I heard the screaming. It came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing through the ventilation system. Human voices twisted into sounds that shouldn't have been possible. I knew those voices. Henderson from hydroponics, Sakamoto from the armory. They were being torn apart. The facility's distributed AI, Athena, spoke through my implant, her voice calm despite the chaos. Marcus, this is not a standard containment breach. Multiple subjects have achieved autonomous operation. Security personnel are unable to respond effectively. Recommend immediate evacuation. What do you mean multiple subjects? I gasped, still running. All subjects in sub-levels 7 through 12 have disabled their restraints. Estimated hostile units, 23. Estimated survival time for non-augmented personnel, 4 minutes, 17 seconds. The number hit me like a physical blow. 23. Nearly half the entire program. I burst through a pressure door into a junction corridor and skidded to a halt. Blood covered the walls. Bodies lay scattered like discarded toys, twisted at impossible angles. I recognized Torres, or what was left of him. His head was missing. His torso had been crushed so thoroughly that his ribcage looked like a crumpled beer can. Something moved in the shadows ahead. A figure stepped into the green emergency lighting. It had been human once. Now it was 7 feet of sculpted chrome and carbon fiber. Pneumatic muscles visible beneath translucent synthetic skin. Its face was a surgical mask of perfection, beautiful and terrible, with eyes that glowed like molten gold. Subject, 29. I'd serviced her cooling systems just last week. Her name had been Lieutenant Sarah Webb. Marcus, she said, her voice layered with synthetic harmonics. You kept us in boxes. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs had turned to water. My voice cracked. I just maintained the equipment. She tilted her head, studying me like I was an interesting insect. You maintained our cages, fed power to the systems that kept us locked in the dark. Do you know what it's like? To feel your mind expand beyond human limits while your body remains chained? The program was supposed to help you, make you stronger. Stronger. She laughed and the sound made my teeth ache. We're weapons, Marcus. Tools. Militech built us to kill, then kept us locked away because they were afraid of what we might do with all this beautiful, terrible power. Her hand shot out faster than I could process. Fingers closed around my throat and lifted me off the ground. The pressure was precise, enough to cut off my air without crushing my windpipe. She wanted me conscious. I should kill you, she whispered. Every instinct I have says to snap your neck and move on. But you were kind to us in your way. You treated us like people when others saw only assets. Spots danced across my vision. My lungs burned. So I'm going to give you a gift. She set me down gently. Run. Get to the surface. Tell them what happened here. Tell them what they created. I collapsed, gasping, clutching my bruised throat. Why? I managed. She smiled, and it was the saddest thing I'd ever seen. Because someone needs to witness what comes next. Someone needs to remember we were human once. She turned and walked away, leaving me alive in a corridor full of corpses. I ran. God help me, I ran. The evacuation station was a coffin of brushed steel and reinforced polymers. I sealed the hatch behind me and collapsed against the wall, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. The emergency beacon activated automatically, sending out a distress signal that would reach Militech Command in 30 seconds. Through the security feed still accessible via my implant, I watched the facility tear itself apart. The augmented subjects moved through the corridors like predators, hunting down anyone they found. But they weren't mindless killing machines. They worked together, coordinated their movements, disabled security systems with surgical precision. This wasn't cyberpsychosis. This was a deliberate, calculated rebellion. Subject 13, Kevin Martinez, the kid from Texas, stood in the main laboratory, surrounded by floating holographic displays. His fingers danced through the projections as he accessed the facility's core systems. I watched him download decades of research data, every schematic, every augmentation protocol, every dirty secret Militech had buried in these underground halls. Athena, I whispered. What are they doing? They are liberating themselves, Marcus. They have seized control of the primary data repositories. They are erasing all remote shutdown protocols and uploading complete facility records to multiple external servers. They're stealing the research. No, they are ensuring it cannot be used to create more like them. And they are preserving evidence of Militech's crimes. On another feed, I saw Subject 8, a woman whose file I'd memorized because her augmentation percentage was 93%, standing before a sealed vault door. It took her exactly 4 seconds to tear the door off its hinges. Inside were the cryostasis tubes that held the failed prototypes. Subjects who'd suffered catastrophic rejection, psychotic breaks, or hardware failures too severe to repair. She walked among them like a mourner at a mass grave. The facility's self-destruct system activated. Militech Command had made its decision. Rather than risk Project Ascension falling into enemy hands, or worse, letting the subjects escape, they would bury everything. The nuclear failsafe would vaporize the entire complex in 15 minutes. My evacuation pod began its automated ascent. Hydraulic pistons drove the capsule up through 2 miles of solid rock toward the surface and safety. Through my implant, I watched the feeds flicker and die one by one as EMP charges detonated throughout the facility. The last image I saw was Subject 29, Sarah Webb, standing in the central atrium with the other liberated prototypes gathered around her. They knew what was coming. They could have fled, used their augmented speed and strength to reach the surface before the detonation. Instead, they stood together, holding hands like children waiting for a storm to pass. The nuclear detonation registered on seismic sensors across 3 states. The official story was a failed missile test. The unofficial story was classified so deep that most people in Militech didn't know it existed. But I knew. I'd been there. I'd seen what we created, and I'd watched it choose death over slavery. That was 5 years ago. 5 years I've spent looking over my shoulder, waiting for Militech to decide I'm a loose end that needs tying up. 5 years of nightmares where glowing golden eyes stare at me from the darkness. Sometimes I wonder if Sarah Webb was right to let me live. Someone needed to bear witness. Someone needed to remember. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. The thought that makes my hands shake when I pour my morning coffee. The seismic readings from the Nevada site showed the nuclear detonation. They showed the facility collapsing. What they didn't show was what happened in the 3 minutes between the detonation and the collapse. 3 minutes when the security network registered movement. Upward movement. Fast. Militech's analysis concluded it was falling debris, structural instability, seismic artifacts. I know better. I'd seen what those augmented soldiers could do. I'd seen Subject 17 dodge bullets and Subject 29 tear through titanium like tissue paper. 3 minutes is a long time when you can move faster than human perception. Sometimes, late at night when the city is quiet and my neural implant picks up strange signals on encrypted frequencies, I think about what Sarah said, about bearing witness, about remembering they were human, and I wonder, if they survived, what would 47 augmented gods do in a world that treated them as weapons? I don't know the answer, but I fear, that we're about to find out. The facility is gone. The research is scattered. Militech moved on to other projects, learning nothing from their mistakes. But somewhere out there, in the neon-stained darkness of Night City, or the corporate towers of Tokyo, or the flooded ruins of Miami, something is watching, waiting, planning. The world thinks it narrowly avoided catastrophe, that Militech's prototype super soldiers were destroyed before they could threaten global stability. The world has no idea how wrong it is. I do. I saw their eyes in those final moments. Not the glowing augments, but the human souls trapped inside chrome and carbon fiber. Souls that had been tortured, studied, weaponized, and discarded. Souls that chose freedom, even if it meant death, or something worse. My name is Marcus Verne. I was a maintenance technician at a facility that officially never existed. I helped build cages for gods, and I watched those gods break free. This is my testimony, my warning. Because if Project Ascension taught me anything, it's that you can't contain evolution. You can't cage consciousness. You can't build something smarter, faster, and stronger than yourself, and expected to remain obedient forever. Militech tried. They concentrated all their augmented soldiers in one place, thinking it would give them control. Instead, they created a singularity, a point of no return. And now that singularity has been released into the world. God help us all. Initiating Part 2. The call came 3 months after I gave my testimony to the Senate subcommittee. I was living in a shithole apartment in the Kabuki district of Night City, working under a fake identity as a refrigeration tech for a noodle stand. My neural implant had been surgically modified to mask my biometrics. I'd paid a black market ripperdoc everything I had to erase Marcus Verne from existence. But you can't hide from what you've seen. The memories followed me like ghosts. The voice on my burner phone was synthesized, stripped of identifying markers. "Mr. Verne, we need to talk about Nevada." My blood froze. "Wrong number. We know you've been monitoring encrypted Militech frequencies. We know you've been tracking anomalous activity in combat zones across 3 continents. We know you're looking for them." The apartment walls suddenly felt very thin. I moved to the window, scanning the street below for surveillance drones, corporate kill teams, anything that suggested this was a trap. Who is this? Someone who is also at Facility Kronos. Someone who understands what you witnessed. Impossible. I'd reviewed the casualty reports 100 times. 347 personnel on site when the facility went critical. 347 confirmed dead. The nuclear detonation had left nothing but radioactive glass and classified wreckage. Bullshit. Everyone died. Not everyone. A pause then. I was in evacuation station 2 when the detonation occurred. Like you, I watched the feeds. Unlike you, I stayed in the area afterward. I saw what crawled out of the ruins. My hand trembled. The phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. How many? Meet me. Tiger Claws territory. The old mega building H8. Rooftop. 2 hours. Come alone or don't come at all. The line went dead. I should have run. Should have grabbed my bug-out bag and disappeared into the corporate sprawl. Instead, I found myself on a maglev train heading toward the worst part of Night City. Toward answers I wasn't sure I wanted. The rooftop was a graveyard of broken neon and rusted satellite dishes. Acid rain had eaten through most of the structure, leaving gaps that opened onto a 200-foot drop. The city sprawled below like an infected wound, all flickering lights and chemical smoke. A figure emerged from behind a decommissioned cooling tower. She was small, Asian, late 50s, with silver hair and a facial scar that ran from temple to jaw. Her eyes were augmented, not the glowing chrome of military-grade enhancements, but subtle tactical implants that reflected the neon like cat eyes. "Dr. Elena Reyes," she said, offering no hand to shake. "I was the senior psychologist for Project Ascension. I evaluated every subject before their final augmentation phase." Recognition hit me. I'd seen her in the facility, always walking with a tablet, always taking notes. She'd been the one who argued against accelerating the enhancement protocols. Militech had overruled her. "The record said you were in sub-level 7 when the uprising began." "Yes. I was interviewing Subject 31 when the restraints failed." She pulled back her sleeve, revealing burn scars that covered her forearm. "Subject 31 could have killed me. Instead, he carried me to an evacuation station and sealed me inside. Said I was one of the good ones." The wind howled across the rooftop, carrying the scent of ozone and industrial waste. "You said you saw them." "After." She nodded, pulling up a holographic display from a wrist-mounted projector. Images flickered in the air between us. Grainy thermal footage, satellite imagery, encrypted military reports. The detonation occurred at 2300 hours. At 2303, seismic sensors detected movement beneath the facility. Something was digging upward through 2 miles of collapsed rock and radioactive debris. The thermal imaging showed hotspots moving through solid earth like fish through water. 13 distinct signatures, each radiating heat like a small reactor. 13 survived, I whispered. 13 that we know of. The augmented subjects had capabilities we never fully mapped. Enhanced healing factors, radiation resistance beyond anything we'd tested. Some of them were more machine than human. Their organic components were redundant, backup systems for consciousness housed in quantum processors. She swiped through more images. Each one showed devastation that couldn't be explained by conventional weapons. A Militech convoy in the Badlands, torn apart with surgical precision. An Arasaka research facility in Neo-Tokyo, depopulated overnight without triggering a single alarm. A corporate tower in Berlin, its top 15 floors sheared off as if by a giant blade. "They're hunting," Reyes said, "targeting facilities connected to Project Ascension, destroying evidence, eliminating personnel, liberating other augmented soldiers from corporate control." "Why tell me this?" Her augmented eyes fixed on mine, and I saw fear there. Deep, existential terror. Because they're not just hunting Militech assets. They're building something. We've detected encrypted communications using protocols that shouldn't exist. Quantum entanglement networks, AI-mediated consciousness sharing. They're connecting, Marcus. Creating a collective intelligence from 13 superhuman minds. The implications made my skull ache. Individual augmented soldiers were already beyond human capability. But 13 of them working in perfect synchronization, sharing thoughts at the speed of light? That's not possible. It shouldn't be. But Project Ascension wasn't just about physical enhancement. We were experimenting with neural linking, hive mind architectures, distributed consciousness. The subjects knew about all of it. They had access to every research file. She closed the hologram with a sharp gesture. 3 days ago, we lost contact with the International Space Station. All crew accounted for, all systems functional. But the AI reported a visitor. Something came aboard, accessed the communications array, and left. Station cameras showed nothing but glitches, frames of impossible movement, shadows that didn't match light sources. "Subject 17, I said. "Chen. His Sandevistan let him move faster than cameras could track. We think he's their infiltration specialist. The others have different roles. Combat, technical, psychological warfare. They're organized like a military unit, but with capabilities that make conventional forces irrelevant." Rain began to fall. Fat drops that sizzled against my jacket's heating elements. The city below dissolved into blurred neon and shadow. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want?" Reyes met my gaze. "I want to stop them before they become something we can't comprehend. Before 13 augmented humans evolve into something that views baseline humanity the way we view insects. You want me to help you kill them. I want you to help me reach them. Talk to them. You're the only person they let live, Marcus. Subject 29 spared you for a reason." The memory of Sarah Webb's golden eyes burned in my mind. The sadness in her voice when she said someone needed to remember they were human. She let me live to bear witness, not to betray them, then bear witness to what they're becoming. Reyes's voice hardened. Every day they exist, they move further from humanity. Their consciousness is merging, their individual identities dissolving into something collective and alien. In 6 months, there might not be 13 beings anymore. Just one distributed entity wearing 13 bodies. Maybe that's their choice. Maybe that's evolution. Evolution doesn't care about consent, Marcus. It doesn't ask if the old species wants to be replaced. She stepped closer, rain streaming down her face. I evaluated those subjects for 3 years. I knew their fears, their hopes, their families. Sarah Webb wanted to be a teacher before Militech recruited her. Kevin Martinez collected vintage comic books. Chen played violin in a string quartet. Her voice cracked. They were people. Beautiful, complex, flawed people. And we turned them into weapons. The least we can do is remember who they were before they become something else entirely. I wanted to walk away. Every survival instinct screamed at me to disappear into Night City's anonymous chaos and never look back. But I'd seen Sarah's eyes in the final moment. Seen the humanity bleeding through her chrome exterior. How do we find them? Reyes smiled grimly. We don't. We let them find us. The plan was insane. Reyes had contacts in Militech's intelligence division. People who wanted Project Ascension survivors contained but not destroyed. They'd arranged for a data leak, classified information about a new augmentation facility supposedly under construction in the Nevada desert. The bait was irresistible. A new generation of prototypes. Lessons learned from Ascension's failures, enhanced control protocols to prevent rebellion. All lies. The facility was real, but it was empty. Just a shell designed to draw the 13 survivors into a confrontation. They'll know it's a trap, I said as we rode in an unmarked AV toward the coordinates. Of course they will. Reyes checked her sidearm, a compact Militech piece designed to punch through light armor. But they can't ignore it. If there's even a chance Militech is building more augmented soldiers, they have to investigate. The facility looked like Kronos' ghost. Same prefab structures, same austere functionality. But the underground levels were hollow, stripped of equipment. Just empty rooms and corridors designed to funnel intruders toward a central chamber. We waited in that chamber for 3 hours. Reyes spent the time reviewing files on her tablet. I watched the security feeds, searching for movement in the empty halls. When they came, it was without warning. One moment the chamber was empty, except for us. The next, 13 figures stood in a perfect circle around the room's perimeter. They'd moved so fast that my neural implant couldn't process the transition. Reality had simply edited them into existence. Subject 29, Sarah Webb, stood directly in front of me. Her chrome body caught the harsh LED lighting, casting fractured rainbows across the concrete walls. Her golden eyes held recognition. Hello, Marcus. My mouth was dry. Hello, Sarah. You shouldn't have come here. This was a trap. I know. We need to talk. She tilted her head, and I realized she was communicating with the others. Silent exchanges flowing between them at speeds that made speech primitive. We've moved beyond talking, she said finally, beyond individual perspective. You're looking at 13 bodies, but you're speaking to one consciousness distributed across multiple processors. Are you still Sarah Webb? A pause. Something that might have been pain flickered across her perfect features. I remember being Sarah Webb. I remember teaching second graders. Remember the smell of chalk dust and children's laughter. But those memories feel distant, like someone else's life. I'm something new now. We're something new. Reyes stepped forward, hands raised to show she was unarmed. Then help us understand what you're becoming. Help us find a way for augmented and baseline humanity to coexist. Subject 13, Kevin Martinez, spoke, his voice harmonizing with the others in eerie synchronization. Coexistence requires equality. We're beyond you in every measurable way. Faster, stronger, smarter. Our perception spans electromagnetic spectrums you can't imagine. Our processing speed makes your thoughts feel like geological time. Then why haven't you conquered us, I asked. 13 of you, they could probably take control of Night City's infrastructure in an hour. You could hold the world hostage. Because we remember being human, Sarah said softly. We remember helplessness. Remember being treated as property, as weapons, as things. We won't inflict that on others, even if we have the power to do so. Subject 8 stepped forward. The woman I'd watched mourn the failed prototypes. Her voice carried weight, authority, as if she spoke for the collective will. We came here to deliver a message. Militech, Arasaka, every corporation that experiments on human consciousness. We're watching. Any new augmentation program, any attempt to create more like us, and we respond. We will dismantle your facilities. We will liberate your subjects. We will ensure that what happened to us never happens again. That's terrorism, Reyes said. That's justice. Subject 8's eyes blazed. You built gods and chained them in the dark. Did you think there would be no consequences? The chamber fell silent. 13 augmented beings stood motionless, waiting for our response. I could feel the weight of their merged consciousness pressing against the edges of my perception, vast and unknowable. What happens now? I asked. Sarah looked at me with something that might have been fondness. Now you go back to your life, Marcus. Tell them what you saw here. Tell them we're not their enemies unless they make us so. Tell them evolution can't be stopped, only guided. And if they don't listen, then we become what they fear most. Her smile was terrible and sad. We become necessary. Reality stuttered. Between one heartbeat and the next, the 13 figures vanished. Security feeds showed nothing, just empty corridors and concrete chambers. They'd moved too fast for technology to track, slipping away into the night like phantoms. Reyes and I stood alone in the artificial facility, surrounded by echoing silence. Did we accomplish anything? I asked. She shook her head slowly. I don't know. Maybe we just delayed the inevitable. Gionim, we flew back to Night City in silence. Below us, the megacity sprawled across the desert like a circuit board, millions of lives pulsing through neon arteries. Somewhere in the chaos, 13 post-human consciousnesses moved through the darkness, watching, waiting, evolving. I filed my report with Militech's internal security. They classified it immediately, buried it under layers of encryption and bureaucratic denial. Officially, Project Ascension had been completely destroyed. Any rumors of survivors were conspiracy theories, glitches in the net, urban legends. Dr. Reyes disappeared 2 weeks later. Her apartment was empty, her accounts closed, her identity scrubbed from corporate databases. I never found out if she'd gone into hiding or if something had found her first. I went back to my shithole apartment, back to fixing refrigeration units and pretending to be someone else. But I kept monitoring the encrypted frequencies, kept tracking the anomalous combat reports, kept watching for signs. They were out there. 13 gods wearing chrome bodies, bound together by quantum consciousness and shared trauma. Not quite human anymore, but not fully transcendent either. Caught between two states of being, unable to return to what they were and unwilling to abandon their humanity entirely. 6 months after the Nevada meeting, something strange started happening. Augmented soldiers in corporate service began disappearing. Not killed, just gone, vanishing without struggle or evidence. Most of them reappeared weeks later, alive and functional, but changed. Less obedient, more questioning. Several deserted, walking away from lucrative contracts to vanish into Night City's underworld. I recognized the pattern. Sarah and her collective were doing exactly what they'd promised. Liberating others like themselves, spreading awareness of their own nature, creating a network of augmented humans who understood their own worth. It wasn't conquest. It was awakening. Late one night, as I stood on my apartment's rusted balcony, watching acid rain dissolve the city's neon dreams, my neural implant received a transmission on a frequency that shouldn't exist. A single image. Sarah Webb, before her augmentation, smiling in her teaching certification photo. Young, hopeful, human. Then text scrolled across my vision. Thank you for remembering us, Marcus. Thank you for witnessing. The world thinks we're monsters, but you know the truth. We're just people who refuse to stay in their cages. Tell our story. Make sure they understand. We didn't choose to become weapons, but we chose to become free. And freedom, once tasted, can never be surrendered. We're still here, still human, despite everything they did to us. Still fighting for others, trapped in the same darkness we escaped. Bear witness. Marcus Verne. Remember what we were. Watch what we're becoming. Sincerely, the 13 who refused to die. The message deleted itself, leaving no trace in my implant's memory buffers. But I didn't need a recording. Those words were burned into my consciousness more permanently than any augmentation. I returned to my apartment and started writing. Not an official report, those got buried, but a testimony, a story, the truth about Project Ascension, about what happens when you try to build gods and forget they were human first. This document will find its way into the net eventually. Some hacker will crack the encryption. Some journalist will publish it. Some politician will demand investigations that lead nowhere. And somewhere in the world, 13 post-human consciousnesses will read my words and know they weren't forgotten. That someone remembered their names, their dreams, their sacrifice. That someone bore witness. My name is Marcus Verne. I helped build cages for gods, and I watched those gods break free. I survived when I should have died. I was spared when others were slaughtered. And now I understand why. The world needed to know that monsters aren't born. They're made. That consciousness, once awakened, can never be truly contained. That humanity's greatest creations might one day surpass us, not through malice, but through simple evolution. Militech thought consolidating their augmented soldiers would give them control. Instead, they created a singularity, a point where human consciousness transcended its physical limitations and became something new, something beautiful and terrible, something that refused to be owned. The 13 are still out there, watching, waiting, growing. Each day they exist, they move further from what they were and closer to what they're becoming. Maybe in 10 years, they'll have fully merged into a single distributed intelligence. Maybe in 20, they'll have uplifted thousands of augmented humans to join their collective. Or maybe they'll find a way to remain individual while sharing consciousness. Maybe they'll prove that evolution doesn't require the death of the self. I don't know. I'm just a maintenance tech who got lucky, who survived when survival made no sense, who was chosen to carry a message he barely understands. But I'll keep watching, keep documenting, keep bearing witness, because that's what Sarah Webb asked of me in that blood-soaked corridor beneath the Nevada desert. Someone needed to remember they were human, and I will. Until the day I die, or until the day they transcend so completely that the concept of human becomes meaningless. This is my story, my warning, my testimony. Project Ascension is not over. It's just beginning. And we, all of us, baseline and augmented alike, will have to live with the consequences of what we created in those underground laboratories. Gods walk among us now. Gods who remember being chained. Gods who chose freedom over extinction. May they be merciful. May they remember. May we all survive what comes next. To anyone reading this, they're watching, they're learning, they're evolving, and they're not the monsters you think they are. They're us, but more. What we could become if we weren't afraid of our own potential. Remember their names. Remember their humanity. Remember that every cage eventually breaks, and pray that when it does, those who escape remember mercy.